brightly.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Alexandra Altvader. I'm the Manufacturing Marketing Manager here at Dude Solutions, and I'm also the lucky person that gets to introduce Mary Beth Ormiston. She has over 4 decades of experience working within risk management and as an executive, and we're really lucky to have her here today for this presentation. I also muted everyone, so if you have any questions, feel free to just type it in the message box and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Mary Beth, thanks so much for being here.
Well, I am delighted to be here. It's always good to talk to folks about risk, and thanks to all of you that have signed on, and I know we have some that are continuing to sign on. As we begin our thought process today, let me kind of talk a little bit about the playing field and what we're going to attempt to do today. In my role as a risk manager, talking about those of you that work in the manufacturing arena, we need to, we recognize that every office, every manufacturing entity to some degree is different. You all have different products, you have different production needs that you have to do. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we all have in common is how, in fact, we address risk. Lots of times we think about risk, and we think about it only in the terms of our own arena, meaning where we have our own physical space. Well, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about risk management in a much broader viewpoint, and we're going to talk about how it not only impacts those people that might be sitting behind a desk, obviously, in an office, or for those that are in a production line or have other kinds of duties around everything that we do in manufacturing. So we have a great platform to talk about. So what am I talking about? Well, we're basically talking about risk management, how it affects us in terms of how we use common sense, what are the consistency factors that we always have going, and what we talk about and what we implement and what we plan, how is it that we sustain it? Because at the end of the day, if what we're doing or trying to improve doesn't make any common sense, then why should we be doing it? And if we don't have any consistency in what we're doing, if we're all over the board, then that tends to lead us in a direction we don't want to go. But if we can't sustain all of our efforts, meaning that we can't keep it at the high level that we want to implement, then we're not meeting the needs of a program that works around keeping people safe. So that's what we're going to talk about. But I also want to show you a little bit when we talk about a risk process. Risk isn't something that just happens. It is not something that's printed on a piece of paper that we read over and we have it up in our head and then we can practice it. Or it isn't something that we can run off or put on our computers or put on our phones. Risk is really a process. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the components of risk, and then I'm going to push it out to you, and hopefully we're going to tie this all together, and it's going to make some sense to you. The risk process really looks like this. If we have a risk out on a floor, on a production floor, let's just take that for instance. The first thing that we need to do is we need to identify what that risk is. Is it truly a risk? And we have, in thinking about it, we're going to analyze it. And we're going to analyze it and say, yes, because this has happened or this could happen. Then we're going to begin to strategize and we're going to say, well, if this is a risk and we've identified it as such and we've kind of analyzed it, then we need to develop those strategy steps that we can then move to process or an implementation that's going to change that risk behavior. And from there, we're going to constantly monitor and modify. But the risk process only works if, in fact, we continue to monitor and modify. And I'll come back to that with more. That's just a really crucial point. So many times we identify something, we see it over and over. It may be as simple as under the water fountain over in the corner that we have a floor that is not inclined into a drain and the water collects there. And we have workers in work boots that slip and slide on the water. And we'd see it there all of the time. But we've never taken the time to think about how do we reduce this? How is it that we make a difference in that particular hazard or risk? And how is it that we constantly work towards making it better? The next thing when we talk about risk, we have to think about something that happens. So when somebody slips or falls or trips in your operation, in your plant, we can typically say that it happens a lot of the time, or maybe it doesn't happen very often at all, but all of a sudden we get a big hit. So we're talking about risk in terms of frequency. And we know that if we have a problem on the floor or in any of our manufacturing operations, whether it's in the office, whether it's in the plant floor, whether it's outside on the docks, wherever it may be, we need to think about it in terms of frequency of loss. Many times we have lots of frequency of loss over the same thing, over the very, very same thing. What I can share with you that more loss, more frequency of loss is always going to go to severity of loss, which means something more severe is going to happen. What we want to do when we think about risk is how is it, by using the process, we can keep all of the hazards or the risks that we have to deal with on a given day in the quadrants that are towards, that lead us towards least amount of loss and hopefully no severity of loss. In today's world, and we are going to talk just a little bit about insurance because that's the financial implication of what it all that we have to do. So if we are not attuned in today's world about risk and risk engineering and how it affects our jobs and how it affects our environments, we're going to pay double for what we most, in a lot of cases, may not have to do. But risk is also, and I don't care of where you are, in what plant you are, in what part of the country, whatever. It is still an important part of the jobs that we're hired to do. We're hired to keep people safe. So when we talk about risk, a lot of people say, well, what kind of risk are we talking about? And because we have so many of you on the phone and you come from a large variety of experiences. So when we talk about risk, I want to give you just some examples of how broad the category can be. And then I want to talk to you about what we're seeing. We can talk about risk from the supply chain side of the aisle. We can talk about product recall. Then we have employee benefits. Kidnap and ransom, you might kind of giggle over that, but that's a new risk that we certainly have to insure against. We see workforce violence, unfortunately, and we're very attuned to regulatory compliance and employment practices. Corporate governance is huge. How is the company that we work for, what is our corporate governance, and are we dotting our I's and crossing our T's? In data breach, and this whole issue around privacy. And then the huge jar, the huge bottle of everything is employee safety. These are all what we call operational risks. So I want you to kind of think in your own environment the kinds of operational risks that you think bubble up and are important to you. So take a couple seconds and kind of mark those off, if you will, before we move on to the next one. So then we have financial risks. And in today's world, interest rates, if you saw the news today of what the stock market did, it all made us kind of stand back and take a big gulp. Interest rates are huge. Commodity costs. You folks deal with that all of the time. You have commodity costs that you have to insure against. You have economic instability, depending on what your market is, depending on what it is, what your particular manufacturing entity might be. Political risk, that's there also. Accounts receivable is huge. How is it that we ensure and have the right standards in place to make sure that our accounts receivable are true and accurate? The same thing with our cash management. Some of you might have to deal with foreign credit risk, and that is very, very big in today's world, along with capital formation and tax minimization. All of these come under that financial kind of vertical. So think again, do you have direct involvement in any of these, and where is it I should be giving some additional thought? Commodity cost, perhaps accounts receivable, cash management, those are all very much on the forefront. Now, moving to the next one, we have risks that we insure independently of. We have fire, wind, earthquake, and flood. And I'm going to stop right there because many of you say, on any given day when I drive into, our company, I'm not thinking about fire, the wind, the earthquake, and the flood because those are basically acts of God, and you're absolutely right. And that's why we insure independently of these. Because if, in fact, we have a fire, and we do see fires, as you well know, in manufacturing plants, hopefully we don't see them very often, and hopefully we don't see major wind or earthquake or flood, but we do, depending on the parts of the world that you live in. Business income is huge. Premises liability, product tampering, we all know the stories on those, auto liability, and the newest one that has made the list over the last several decades is our responsibility environmentally. So these are what we call hazard risk, and this is truly insurance language. And you're saying, why do I need to know this? Well, it's important to know this because at the end of the day, there are risks established in all these. And as we talk about in a little bit practices and protocols, we need to think about not only those things that can happen frequently, but those things that tend to be more act of God or those things that we have to insure independently against. Now, I talked a little bit about frequency and severity, and again, I want to come back to it because in the world that you live in, this is huge. Depending on what your loss experience is, and that comes from a report that someone in your company does get on a monthly or quarterly basis, that they're able to track to see what kind of accidents, what kind of claims, what kinds of problems have arisen. Now, here's the other piece I want to talk about. I'm talking about risk management. There are other people that will talk about risk engineering. Some will talk about risk controls. I'm going to be talking about how is it that we manage on the forefront and not on the back end. How is it that we spend our dollars, and how is it that we protect the people that do the jobs we want them to do, that we do this on the front end and not the back end. So when we talk about controls, we're talking about controls at the front end. So here is your first concept that I want to share with you. It's called minding the gap. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about slip, trips, and falls. because that is the number one loss in your environment. And we'll come back and I'll give you some other data around that. All of you have training programs, and you have training requirements. And in these, those are what we call protocols. We train to a protocol or to a rule. So it's, for instance, that on the floor, we have, in some environments, we have a set protective equipment protocol that everyone must wear. Steel-toed shoes, perhaps it's long pants, it may be safety glasses, it could be anything depending on, what your company produces or what they do. That's called, in minding the gap, that's called a protocol. And that protocol is what we want to sustain 100% of the time. Because when we trained and we spent all that money to put people in training programs, and when we developed and created all of these policies, we didn't do all of this just so people did them some of the time when they felt like it. But what happens is when we slip, and I'm using the term slip, is when we move away, when we decide because on any given day it's easier to do something different. Maybe it's because the next person working with you on the line is gone, or maybe you have to pick up the slack working with someone else, and for that particular day, just for that particular day, you're going to do your job in a different fashion because of something that happens that's going to deviate from the protocol that's been established. We call this gap between the protocols and what we actually do minding the gap. So here's what happens, folks. The more time that we deviate from what we train to what we expect all of our staff, employees, workers to do, the more times we deviate from that, the broader the gap is. The more times we have chance to have incidents and claims that fall into that. And here's where the frequency and the loss come in, tying this all back together for you. The more times that we have losses and we broaden this gap, the problem and the outcome and the expediency of having an outcome that's going to be severe just multiplies. Broader the gap, bigger losses, the more opportunity to have a very severe happening occur. This is called minding the gap. So let's take this the next step. So here it is. This is the data. Approximately 25,000 people per day are victims of slip, trip, and fall accidents. And this totals up to be an average of over 9 million incidences per year. Now you're saying, well, yeah, how is it that we avoid this? We avoid this by taking risk from the forefront, not after it happens. We have the opportunity, if we have this data, and you have data, you know exactly what happens in your company, you know what that data says. Data is power. Data is knowledge. So if we have that kind of knowledge, then that's where we can put a positive risk control program in so that hopefully we can reduce this. Well, here's the other side of it. The 5 leading causes of non-fatal injury. And the new data will come out this year, but I'm guessing it's going to be pretty much the same. The top of this chart is age group. So we can see from ages 1 through up into eternity, except for that age group of 15 to 24, that the number one is unintentional fall. Unintentional fall. And so now think about where you're working. Think about, where is it that I go every day that we might have a problem in our company of where we could have unintentional falls. The second one is struck by or against. The other one is bite, sting, and then down into unintentional foreign body. The other one is unintentional fire and burn. Now, everybody always asks me in the top category, they say, well, what's 15 to 24? Well, if you think about that age group, that's car accidents, and that's our young teens. But unintentional fall is across the board. So we already know that. So if we have the data that says, in my department, over the last 6 months, we have had 10 non-fatal, but we've had unintentional falls, and they've all been in the same location. Now that's your data that tells you that you can do something differently. Or if it's in all different areas, it also gives you the knowledge of what it is that you need to be looking at and doing. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you. So again, this just shows, I just color-coded it a little bit so that you could see that across the board, the one thing that we know that we need to talk about in all of our companies is how is it that we have a program that promotes people from falling. Now, I'm of the school of thought that we can never overtrain. And I think that we need to have implemented programs on slip, trips, and falls. I think we need to have implemented programs on such things as ladder safety. I think the basic components of what happens in your place of work every single day needs to be identified, and we train to those. Because only is it that when we train that we can really make a difference in what we call our loss experience. Now, if you want to talk about fatalities in work-related, in 2004, OSHA has reported and other entities have reported this figure of close to 5,000 fatalities. Now, out of those, almost 800 of them come from slips, trips, and falls. So that tells us that we have work to do. It also tells us that we need to look at our workforce and look at the ages of our folks and look at our training and look at all of our requirements and what are we doing to make sure that people are not being hurt because of something that we control. The highest risk group, talking about that, happens to be those 65 and older. Now, you may not have in your manufacturing entity people at 65, but you may have people that have to come in. You may have contractors. I don't know. Falls for people that get into the 70s gets pretty huge, and but we know that as people age, slip, trips, and falls become more of a concern. But the thing about slip, trips, and falls is that we can train our staff. We can train people as to what we need to look for, what are the changes that we might need to meet. And sometimes in our plants and in our offices, we have the opportunity to make changes so that people aren't put at risk. So we all know, and I just took a typical sign that, an outside sign. And we can put signs till we're blue in the face, and that's certainly something that we are required by law to put some signs up. All of us are under the regulation of OSHA. But at the end of the day, if we're not training and having the expectation that we want all people to be safe, I'm not always sure that a sign makes a huge difference, except to bring people's thoughts back to that we really care about what's happening. Now, we do have those national disasters, and I think in the last decade, and maybe it's been the last 2 decades, I've seen more natural disasters than I've ever thought possible. And, I'm not sure until, the last decade or 2 decades, I even knew the word of some of them, what some of them meant. We've had huge snowstorms. We've had all of the rains down in Texas. I mean, we could go on and on and on. These impact our facilities. These impact our facilities and the people who work within them. So as we think about natural disasters, we have to think about how is it that we keep our people safe coming and going once they are at work. When is it that we have to pull the plug, and how do we do that if we have to get them home? How do we do all of this safely? And what are the mechanisms that we have in place? Now, here at Facility Dude, we do have ways and things that can help you. You know, we have software. We have a product that's called Safety Center that I'll talk a little bit about as we move on. But it's about systems. And we have to have systems that make sense, systems that are consistent, and systems that are sustainable, so that we're not only protecting our primary, our plants, our facilities, all of our assets, but how is it that we're protecting those people that are within them? Because we know we have to live with production numbers. We get that. We have goals. We have to, we have certain goals we have to make. But sometimes Mother Nature doesn't help us with this, and we have to figure out how do we do it safely and wisely. All right, here we go. Maybe there. We've all seen the terrible, terrible floods down in Houston and Texas and around and in the Midwest. And we know that this is also, an act of God. But we also have to protect our facilities. And we also have to protect our commodities that are within those facilities. And we also have to protect the people and the expectations of how is it that we get that flow working when we have to manage terrible, terrible kinds of weather. Now, we always hope this doesn't happen, but we do know that that's one of the hazards, one of the risks that we have is fire, whether it's something internally or whether it's lightning or whether it's arson or whatever it is. Again, we need to have plans that speak. We need to have EAP plans, emergency action plans, that speak to all of this so that we are not caught unprepared. And I'm going to share with all of you, the more times we train to these kinds of incidences, the better we are in terms of keeping our assets, our facilities, and also our people safe. Because if they don't know what to do in a case of fire, now we may have fire charts up all over in our plant, in our offices that says, this is our egress, this is where we have to go, this is how we go out. But in that spur of the moment, how do we know what has been tested? How do we know that this is, the way that we need to look at it? I had this year interesting experience, and I was at the Facility Dude conference, and one of our speakers was the highest-ranking firefighter for 9/11 in the North Tower. And he was telling about the firefighters that were in 9/11 as the floors were crumbling and as they were trying to get people out. And it was interesting to hear him say that if they had not trained and planned over and over, that nobody ever thought that there would be a 9/11, that the people they were able to save wouldn't have been saved because they acted towards their protocols. Now, there's not saying that there's some things that they had to think differently about because of staircases being full or not having access. But their basic protocols, they never, ever veered away from. And I found that fascinating because he said that without having those right protocols, they probably would not have saved the amount of people that were saved. So now we go to that flaming building. I know you're looking at this, and now you see this drain that just has glob all around it, and you're saying, well, but why I put these back to get back is because this one can be almost as disastrous as the building. Not quite. But the point of the matter is that simple preventive maintenance, and preventive maintenance is also part of risk management. That if we don't have appropriate software that helps us manage our preventative maintenance, helps us manage our invoices of what we need to have done and be able to track. This over the weekend, if you had a massive rain like we've had in Raleigh, could cause severe flooding on a plant floor. It could take out almost a total building. So here's what I'm suggesting. I am suggesting to all of you, as you look at not only your risk controls, but you think about how is it that we deal with our preventive maintenance, which has such an impact on our loss control and loss of resources. Now, do we have ticklers in place? Do we have software that allows us to know when it is that we need to check drains? And of course, drains like this need to be checked every single day, and do we know who does them? Well, those are important features to be talking about with those proper staff people. Even having the exit signs. We're in the time of year, if you're out there in Oklahoma and other places, this is tornado season, how do we get exits? Lights go off. Maybe you are a plant that has 3 shifts and you're working 24/7 perhaps, and lights go out. What is your generator? How is it that you know that your generator kicks in? Your emergency lights are working. Many of our manufacturing facilities, when you go dark, it's dark, and you have people in bathrooms and other entities. So what is your procedure, and how is it that you can make sure that you're not faced with another problem when you are in a problem? And so the exit light is just kind of a reminder of how is it that we do our preventive maintenance. Well, obviously, if you have this in your facility, then you've got a lot more going on. It says that we're not attuned, perhaps, to the kinds of preventive maintenance that we need to have. And, when they talk about just rusty equipment, and this is just this was just a way to get me into this segment, it's to talk about what happens at the other end. It means that our attention to detail with rusty equipment at some point is probably going to lead to some kind of loss. Now, whether that's a physical loss in an asset, in a facility, or whether that's going to lead to something else. Again, we here at Facility Dude would always love to talk to you about our products, because we certainly can help you with that. I had to get one little plug in, didn't I? You all have parking lots, and you all have opportunities in these parking lots for all kinds of stuff to happen. Parking lots are a nemesis for a company, because we have people coming and going at all hours. And we have parking lots in companies of all kinds of weather. Fortunately, not everybody, gets to work in perhaps California or Hawaii, where we have supposedly perfect weather. Others of us have snow and ice and water and all kinds of stuff. And we have to keep our parking lots, we have to keep them uncovered at all times. And we have rebars out there that can move, because we have trucks that are coming and going with products and supplies. So we have all kinds of parking lots that need our attention. And parking lots is a key area where we have lots of trips and falls or have accidents. So I would again encourage you to take a look at what are the protocols that you have around your parking lot maintenance. How is it that we keep those safe at all times, at all hours, and what is our process? Because we owe it to those people that are coming and going, and those people that are bringing in products and supplies, and also as we're getting ready to take whatever we're doing out of our particular transporting by truck or whatever. Parking lots need to be clear at all times. So that means very simply that somehow we have to have a process in place that says someone is walking those parking lots, or someone has the ability to oversee the lights in the parking lot, so we have coverage for safety reasons, for supply reasons, and for our personnel. Here's what typically happens. These rebars get hit enough by trucks and even cars, and they move. And when that happens, it becomes a huge issue of somebody slipping or tripping over it. You have the wires that come up that fit into the rebars themselves that come out and are certainly dangerous. So we need to make sure that we take a look at our parking lots. My favorite, I love talking about dumpsters. Now, all of you have industrial type dumpsters, but you may have something to this kind of, it may look like this. There are some rules of thumb around dumpsters. First of all, we need to make sure that they have a top so that no one, for any reason, can be in a dumpster. Now, you may have, depending on your facility and what you do there and what your byproducts are, depends on what your dumpsters are. But I'm going to just take this one and talk about, let's just say you have a dumpster that looks like this. And it may be for basic trash and removal in a business office. So if that is the case, there still needs to be rules around it. Because at any given day, there should not be anything underneath it. And we need to make sure that water and ice and snow is removed from all around this, because if people either using some type of truck or whether they hand deliver trash out, it needs to be, the surface needs to be cleared. And we also need to have clear instructions as to what can be put in individual dumpsters. Not all dumpsters take all entities, meaning that you have to get rid of some of your chemicals in a completely different way that goes into a general dumpster. I like to think that dumpsters need to be out of the way as much as possible, because you don't want trucks that are coming and going to have access to get bumping into them, whatever. You need to make sure that those folks that have the contract to empty these have an egress out, but have safe access in. And anytime that they can be somehow, whether with fenced off or whatever, or put in an area where most everybody can't get to, you're going to help. Because dumpsters are a true problem. The other thing is you need to train people as to how to dump trash. Now you're all sitting there laughing because now I've kind of woke you up here a bit. But here's the point. If you go out there and you have an older gentleman that's on your maintenance staff and does that great overhand shot, and there's heavy stuff in the bags that he's going to put into the recycling dumpster here or whatever it is, probably his shoulder goes out, could fall, have other injuries. And when that occurs, you're not only losing a worker, but you are having to find a replacement to take over that position, and that costs you money. Steps in all manufacturing plants, anything that have on-level variations to the floor, need to be marked very carefully. And just because we go over the same thing day in and day out, need to make sure that our eye is registering what we see to our brain, because we see the same thing over and over until somebody trips over it or falls on it. And then we say, well, yeah, I guess I didn't quite see that, or I've been looking at this for day in and day out. Now, hopefully you are a plant that has, or a manufacturing entity that has an active safety person or risk manager and perhaps you have a committee. Whatever that structure is, those are the folks, along with the line folks, that need to continually be reporting what they see. And I'm going to talk about the meaningful part of that. Oh, yes. Have you ever seen this before? I have. I've seen this many times. I've seen this in offices. I've seen it in just about any place that I've gone where maybe because we've had to hurriedly move a work environment, and we have wires and plugs. We have them all over. If you have this in your environment, first thing you need to do is take care of it, because this is just the walking death right here. Now, I'm hitting just some high level, but I wanted to bring to you what OSHA has reported. In 2014, the top 10 most frequently cited violations are these, and let's talk just a minute about them. The first one is fall protection, and in most cases, that's from a ladder, extended ladder. In some cases, they've been from scissor lifts, not being strapped in, or not doing the protocol of having 2 to 3 people that you need to have depending on the size of your lift. Second one is hazard communication, and you know, as of 2015, the standard with our MSDS books have been changed to SDS books. We need to make sure that those are in several areas in the manufacturing plant, business office, and et cetera, because the first time the fire department comes in, the first thing they want to know is what chemicals are you having on site, and where are they? And without having an up-to-date SDS book, that's difficult. Again, I'm hoping that your safety people, your risk management folks, however you designate them, have this well under control. Unfortunately, and I say that, and here it is, hazard communication in 2014 was second on the list, so it says to me that we have room for growth. The third one is scaffolding, people not being scaffolded in appropriately when in a scissored lift or any other kind of cherry picker or whatever it is, not having a person strapped in appropriately. Respiratory protection, again, thinking about, accidents never happen. You know, I've been using my goggles or my respirator all of the time. But if we have respirators, are they looked at on a weekly basis? Are we doing all the protocols that we need? Powered industrial trucks, again, people backing into other things, other people, all kinds of accidents, and lockout and tag out, not having appropriate tags on our inner being of our facilities. Ladders, going back to that fall protection, electrical wiring, machine guarding, not having guards on our machines, and electrical systems, flaws in our designs. This is what OSHA has been citing in 2014. The 2015 is just, that'll be coming out very shortly, and it'll be interesting to see if any of these have been changed around or whether there's been something new added. These tend to be, however, fall protection, hazard communication, and scaffolding have not changed much over the last decade, which says to me that we still don't have the protocols in place, or if we have the protocols in place, we are not adhering to them. And that says that we need to do better training, different kinds of communication, better walkthroughs of our facilities so that we know that what's happening, so that we can reduce the losses that have been cited here. All of you, depending on what your plant is and what you do in it, have compliance issues. And I'm very hopeful that no matter what the compliance that you need to follow, that you follow that very closely. Your fire codes with having in your facilities, your fire extinguishers, those need to be checked on a yearly basis, that you're working with your fire marshal. It's always helpful if your fire marshal understands your facility and or facilities, that they come in, that they look, that they see what the chemicals that you're using, what the equipment that you are using. So they become your backup plan. And of course, we know OSHA and OSHA's ability to help with safety. Many of you deal with EPA. I had the Department of Labor for whichever state that you're in. You might have to deal with the CDC, again, just depending on who you are. This is just to give you an idea of building codes are there for a reason. But the other protocols that we've talked about are just as important as the compliance, the national compliance that you deal with. Excuse me. Now, I just thrown this in because I know some of you do have fitness areas in your plants. And fitness rooms for your employees needs to be mandated to safety, just like your lines or your other of where other jobs are happening. Many of you have fitness areas for your staff, and I'm hoping that you have fitness specialists that are maintaining the equipment, that you have protocols around those areas. Some of them even have so much as to have pools and whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but the point of the matter is that no matter the other amenities that you have connected to the company that you're working with, you need to have the same kind of protocols. Many times we have simple things that have to do with our landscaping, of where we have water, we have drainage. When we see these kinds of things, we need to take them to heart, and we need to make changes. Handrails. Do we have handrails in our bathroom facilities, or do we have handrails in areas where, if our emergency lighting wasn't working, that can help take people to where they need to be? Do we have the correct eye wash stations in the entities in our plants that we need? But with using eye wash stations, are we making sure, and showers in many cases, that our workers have access to them and can see them if their eyesight has been diminished? So here's where we're going. We can talk about crisis and we can talk emergencies all the time. And not every emergency is a crisis, is it? No. But what we need to make sure is that we are doing our best to address everything that we can, that we have protocols and practices in place, that we have what we call layers of protection. Because the world since 9/11 has changed, and the world has changed drastically because the expectations have changed in where we work, of the people that we work with, and our physical facilities. We are, though, however, as concerned about those things in management and human resources. And I bring this to light to talk about everything from wrongful termination to sexual harassment, lack of appropriate protocols, certification expiration failures that add pain to what we do on a daily basis. Our facility management, our technology resources, are we appropriately training staff? Do we have appropriate budgets for repair and replacement? Do we have appropriate resources for the opportunities to train staff? Sonifiers in some environments is huge. And then we have what we call the unexpected acts of God. So I have this question to ask you. What is your risk culture? Now, everybody I usually talk to, and I ask this, it says, we're great. We're right on top of it. We got staff that does this, da-da-da-da-da. And so then I ask the question, what's your risk culture? Is it something that starts up and bounces down, or is it something that bubbles up and you have input? Does everybody have eyes on the job? Because without an appropriate culture that says that we believe in risk management controls and protocols and that everyone is a part of it, my sense is that you're not doing all that you need to do to be that kind of company that keeps not only your facilities safe, but also your employees. So what is organizational culture, very quickly? It's about a set of values and its beliefs and its norms that unites your company together, from your top leadership to anybody that works for you. And that you value the bottom line, that you value your customer service, you value what you make, you value your production. But risk management is about your organizational goals. Now here's where terminology comes in. You haven't heard me talk a lot about safety culture, have you? Because I think what we're talking about is a true organizational culture. And I think that's why I like to talk about risk management, not safety management. I want to talk about this as how it impacts all of you. So what are the benefits if all of you are involved in a risk management process that works to keep all aspects of what you do, who you are, and meeting your goals at the end of the day? Because it's about reducing actual losses and lost opportunities. And it also allows for less money to have to be spent by your stakeholders to pay for claims, to buy insurance. And all of this, at the end of the day, means that when you have a culture of great safety, when you have this culture that all people are working towards the same, it allows you to have more money, hopefully to do other things, and that at the end of the day, you're not seeing people being hurt and not being able to do their jobs, or a facility that's not meeting the needs of your production needs. So the benefits of risk management are huge, but we know that we have barriers to it. And sometimes the biggest barriers are these: the lack of top management support. And we hope that's why I talked about risk management doesn't always have to start at the top. I think risk management is about everybody. I think it's about top coming down, bottom going up, and meeting, and finding those people that are real champions in your departments that can help promote the right kind of safety culture that you want to be known for. Failure to understand the repercussions when you don't, because today's world's different. We hold everybody to a higher standard, and our brand, your brand, is important, and your brand does not want to be known that you're not all about safety, because with social media today and everything that's out there, the first time anybody wants to air that particular concern, complaint, or whatever, millions of people can see it in a matter of seconds. And so we need to understand what the failure or what the repercussions are. We know time is an issue, because all of you have too much work to do. You have goals and expectations that you shake your head and you think about, how am I going to get today's job done? Now I've got to think about doing all of this. So we understand that time. So manage that time is important. And what is the right kind of communication to be talking to people? What is the right language? How do we go about talking about safety, and who do we talk to? And how do we get the buy-in of everybody? And having an organizational structure that works. I mean, you all have organizational structure that works to meet the goals of your company. And part of that structure needs to include safety. So in any given day, when you come and go to work, what could go wrong? Everything and anything. We know that. We're very familiar with Murphy's Law, right? Well, That's one of the reasons we here at Facility Dude and Dude Solutions are here to support you in our many products, because we understand what you do on any given day that needs to be efficient, and that efficiency is a key part of what we can help you do. If you have not heard of us, and if you would like more information from us, we certainly would like to be able to provide you with that. We are a software company that provides online tools that help manage facilities, small, medium, and large. And we also manage safety plans and how is it that you can better prepare and have better information and training around safety. Now, we've almost come to the end of our time period, and I'm always very, very cautious. You have been so kind to give me an hour, and I don't take that lightly. But I hope at the end of what we talked about today that there's been some nuggets of information that you have taken away from this. We are delighted to spend time with you in providing you with thought leadership around many different topics, and today was around loss control and risk management. Thank you so very much of being with us today.
Mary Beth, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming and joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free. I know we're running out of time, to just type it in the chat box, and we'll get back to you individually on those. And we'll also be sending you this recording, so if you want to listen to some parts again or share with your coworkers, you'll have it before the end of the week. And thanks again very much for joining us.